just follow on with that, very similar to the internet boom. Everybody wants to have their mobile app. The CIO came in with the iPad, and now they want to know, why can't I do X on my iPad, and why don't I have an app for that? So a lot of the prospects and customers we talk to are talking about mobile apps, and it cuts across all the verticals. But where we're seeing the most traction in terms of people that are furthest along in the life cycle of actually doing something about it. Retail is probably up there #1 in point of sale systems, inventory management systems, and then healthcare information systems, enabling doctors with patient information and doing that in a secure way. Those are probably the top 2 that we're seeing in terms of traction and verticals for us.
I would say, you don't get a lot of debates about whether the mobile app is the future anymore, which everybody believes it is. I think that the bigger debate is the future, whether it's native app versus web apps. And a lot of times, whether it's consumers or enterprise, there's a lot of there's a lot of challenges in how to manage that the device fragmentations. How much do I know about the devices? How much do I know about the capabilities? And a big problem is sharing content among the different platforms. And a lot of times, you may have, if all the devices and platforms have different media players, the Flash is a great example of your video content cannot port across devices. So I think some of the challenges would be in those areas.
So I'm going to ask one, and then I'll come back to you. So you're talking about variety of platform, okay? And I think almost everyone here today talked about apps on iPad, right, or iOS. So you got to develop for iOS. What do you see? Given the news about WebOS the other day, what do you see for WebOS, and what do you see for the other challenged ecosystem, which is BlackBerry? Is that a good word? I don't know.
The PC way of saying?
Yes, very PC. Right?
Well,
I'm neutral here.
So I'll talk about the way kind of I look at it. With the devices, I think the bigger problem is which platforms attract the developers, which is this ecosystem. Apple has made it easiest to develop on the iOS platform because it's single SKU. If you want to develop for iPad, it's a single screen size. If you want to do iPod and iPhone, they're all single screen size with the same SKU, the same OS. With Android, obviously you do get that fragmentation of different implementations, and that was the problem with Java early on, if you remember. Java, people say it's a standard, but everybody has a different implementation of the standard. Therefore, you can, one thing works on one device, it doesn't have the seamless experience on the other device. I think iOS kind of changed the world in the sense that it able to attract the developer ecosystem. So right now, the conventional wisdom, if you look at at least on the consumer side, is you develop the experience really well for the iOS platform, and then you port it. Then you look at the audience that your app are meant to serve, and you port to the ones that you believe they're on. Which the BlackBerry is a shrinking market. So you have to make a decision whether you do your Windows Mobile first because it's growing versus something that's shrinking.
How many people are developing for Windows Mobile?
Great.
Let me. So WebOS, I think it's dead. Okay, no one's going to touch that after numerous people. And at the same time, what they've just done is perform CPR on Windows Mobile with the Google acquisition of Motorola, right? So it gave that new life. But I think that portends the bigger issue, which Alan spoke to before, and that is there's still chaos out there. There's no real definition in the marketplace because of all the different platforms. As much as we talk about Apple, it's still only a fraction of the marketplace. So when you start to develop for them, you're only reaching best double-digit penetration on anything. It's been our philosophy that in order to understand what your customers are doing, the web platform up front may be a better development, because otherwise you're going to develop it 3 and 4 and 5 times for each one of the major platforms. You go in, you find out what's going on with your customers, how are they interacting on the mobile web, and then develop the applications in a much more intimate way, to be able to interact with your customers in a much more intimate way, because now you know what they're doing out on those platforms. And then over time, as the platforms start to consolidate, which they will over the next 4 to 5 years, and that's a whole 2 or 3 generations of new apps and new platforms and new OSs, then you can start to really get a long-term strategy in place on how you're going to deal with the remaining OSs and how does that interact with the web platform.
How many people are developing in HTML5? About the same as the number of developing in Windows. Question back there?
This was actually related to an earlier question. You were talking about enterprise adoption. Given how every one of us who has an iDevice or a Windows Phone device on AT&T has experienced the joy of losing connections, are you guys building into your business schemes caching and other things? Because AT&T is seeing an 8,000% increase in data usage. Verizon's starting to get hammered. Enterprise customers get really finicky when things don't work over the wireless. So would you advise folks to start thinking about the wireless, the lack of guaranteed connectivity as you build your caching and as you think about data storage, or is that too hard to deal with?
Well, I think you actually hit on one of the key issues. Back to that last question around, do you build a web platform or do you build natively? And to me, to us, for At47, it's kind of the wrong question. The question is about the user experience, and how do you get an experience that focuses on working in a mostly connected environment, regardless of how you do that. And if you're not thinking about that in a mobile app, you're kind of starting on the wrong platform, because regardless of what 4G or LTE or anything else gives you, we're always going to be in a wireless environment going forward. You are not connected and you will lose connectivity. So it's got to be about the experience, and it's got to be about whether it's native or it's web or it's HTML5. It's got to be work in that mostly connected environment. It's got to be instantaneous. It's got to be in, get your job done, and get out. So as long as that experience stays true, the platform really doesn't matter that much, and it should be built in regardless of what platform you're thinking about.
Another question?
What's our 30-second pitch, elevator pitch to businesses?
I'm going to give a countdown here.
Time.
You ready?
Ours is less than that. We make mobile rundown.
About 3.
3 seconds. All
All right, stretch. No. So we provide application intelligence for mobile apps. We allow you to focus on your domain problem, and we take care of the infrastructure.
We help apps to provide the services to non-app users and have them convert to your app.
My employees assure me I've never said anything in less than 30 seconds. I've got an employee in front here. Our pitch really, we have 2 businesses, but on the mobile compliance side, we help brands protect their brands and make sure that what happens in the mobile space doesn't happen in front of Congress and get on the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Everyone made it under 30 seconds. So let me pick up on that kind of line of thinking and some of what we heard earlier from Mac. When I talk to businesses, and I'm joking, but this is not entirely an exaggeration, the first 15 minutes of my conversation is not about their problem, it's about security. Right? Is that what you see, Alan? And like, when are we going to get through that, or is this like the new normal, like 300 tornadoes a year?
And or an earthquake.
And earthquakes.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of that is you got to understand. Part of the challenge is that the enterprise did an unnatural act of trying to figure out how to undo what they did, and that is because of the wave of employee-owned devices, they, in essence, opened that up and allowed those in without having fully thought through how are they going to secure the devices, how are they going to secure the apps, how are they going to connect them, how are they going to deliver data, how do they prevent data leakage, all sorts of questions, the policies about what they can and cannot do. with the devices and the data. So none of that was really well thought out or thought through. And when it was, I'll give an example. I was down with a customer, long-standing customer of ours, some 70,000 devices deployed. I had a long-standing debate with them. They swore they would never, ever go to employee liable. They were an accounting firm, and they understood the legal ramifications of employee liable would never happen. I went to visit them 4 days after the iPad was launched. They were in complete panic because 2 days earlier, the CIO said, we're going to allow employee-owned devices because all our partners bought iPads over the weekend, and we're letting them in. 3 days after that, they already had 1,000 iPads on the network. They expected it probably to be 3,000 by the end of the week. They just reversed every single policy and what they thought they were going to do in a matter of, in essence, 2 hours. They've been struggling to kind of get that figured out. So that's why security is such a hot burning issue right now, is because they're playing catch up, and they're playing catch up in a world that's incredibly complicated, and where most of the vendors, be they application developers, be they device manufacturers, what have you, have not really thought security all the way through and all the different permutations. I don't know if anybody paid attention to Black Hat. You know, when you look at what I like to do at Black Hat, some of the hacker developer conferences, look at what they're talking about. There were 4 presentations on iOS, how to hack the iPhone and iOS, and there were 5, maybe 6 presentations on how to hack Android. Why? Because it's now the easiest path into the enterprise. It's brand new, it hasn't been hardened. It's basically, if you're going to hack in the enterprise, that's the way to go. These are all brand new, you know, this software is, as my head of engineering would say, most of the software is still a little gooey. It's not fully thought out, it hasn't been attacked, but it's getting it now.
Yeah, I was talking to an intelligence guy, and he pointed my iPad and says, that's an attack surface.